Now, something tells me that Game Week 29 is going to be a pretty popular time for FPL managers to use their free hit. And if you're one of those managers, I've got a draft for you. All right, we're going to get straight into things then, and we're going to start off with the defence. And what I've got here is some clean sheet odds courtesy of Elevenify to try and help inform our decision making in terms of which defenders we pick. So we've got top 5 defences here for keeping clean sheets. They haven't actually wiped Liverpool, Newcastle, Crystal Palace and Villa from this list, so you can ignore them. We can't pick those players, obviously, because they blank in Game Week 29. Top 4 or 5 being Arsenal, Man City, Everton and Forest. Now, 2 teams in there kind of stick out to me as teams that I probably wouldn't actually back to keep clean sheets. One of them being Man City. Well, Man City could keep one. They got Brighton, but I'm not massive on them. I'm also not massive on Everton. In terms of 2 teams that I don't think you can hang your hat on any team to keep a clean sheet in any week, but 2 teams I think have a good chance of doing so are probably Arsenal and Forest. So that's what I've gone for in my defence, basically. I've gone for double Forest defence. So I've picked Sells and Milenkovic, who both have Ipswich away. Now, I think Ipswich away is a pretty good fixture for Forest. You know, both come in at a sensible price, so you can quite easily squeeze them in amongst some other premium players, which we'll get onto in a second. So I quite like the 2 of them. Now, Guardiola is an interesting one. I think if you're on your free hit, it makes sense to pick Man City players. Now, they did just lose 1-0 to Nottingham Forest, and we all know the form that they've been in this season, right? It's been probably the worst since at least Pep took over. But they still have talented players in their team. And I think particularly of Guardiola, you know, it wouldn't be completely out the realms of the possibility for Man City to keep a clean sheet against Brighton at home, first of all. And genuinely, every time I watch Man City play with Guardiola at left back, the positions that he takes up, the runs that he makes, his ability to shoot from outside the box, he's really good within the air as well with his head. I see him almost scoring every time I watch him. So I think Guardiola is worth going for. He's a relatively differential player, at least amongst engaged managers at the moment. Not many people are going to own Guardiola, right, based on Man City's current defensive performances. So he's a bit of a differential. And I think if you're on your free hit, it's worth going for him. So yeah, I think attacking returns pretty likely. And yeah, quite like his, well, I say pretty likely, as likely as you can get for a defender, I think. And also, I do think Man City have a chance for clean sheet. Milenkovic, I think of all of the Nottingham Forest defenders, he's the one I'd still pick. I think he offers, well, I don't think it's factual that he offers the most attacking threat in terms of his XG that he's put up this season. He's good from set pieces. And yeah, I prefer him to Aina. And I think if you're on your free hit as well, I just don't think there's any point picking Aina. You know, you spend a load of money on him, or a lot more money than you would on Milenkovic. I think he's over $500,000 more expensive than Milenkovic at the moment. And you get less attacking upside. And I've gone for Gabriel as well. Chelsea looking a bit toothless at the moment, I won't lie. Particularly at the Emirates, I think Arsenal could keep a clean sheet there. I will say, Arsenal are literally playing Man United at the time that I'm recording this video. So if anything happens to Gabriel, I'd probably suggest just picking another Arsenal defender you expect to start. But we'll go for Gabriel for the time being. I've also gone for Howson, the Bournemouth defender, on my bench alongside Greaves. Greaves is just there as a placeholder, really. I think if you're on your free hit, you don't really need to worry too much about your bench. You know, most of your 11 should be playing. I went for Howson as the other defender, though. Brentford at home for Bournemouth, a decent fixture, but I'm not massive on them keeping a clean sheet. But when you look for cheap defenders that have a good fixture, well, there aren't really many for 29, so I went for Howson. So yeah, defence, Sells, Gabriel, Guardiola, Milenkovic. Okay then, on to the midfield, and I'm going to look at the Fantasy Football Hub expected points to help inform my decision on my midfielders. Now, I'm not saying I'm just going to pick the top 5 in my midfield. That's not what I'm going to do. Well, I might pick quite a few of them, but I also think in general, the players that are towards the top of this list are there because they have a good fixture and they've been pretty decent this season. The one I would say controversial one is Cole Palmer. Now, he's just blanked again against Leicester in a fixture you would ordinarily consider to be good for him. He obviously missed a penalty in that game as well, so he had a good chance of scoring there. So that's 3 games now. His last 3 games hasn't got a single attacking return. And in each of those games, he's put up above 0.7 expected goal involvement. So You'd have expected him to get, I think I'd have expected him to get something in all three of those games. He's not, basically. Arsenal away is a tough fixture, don't get me wrong. I've picked him in my draft, basically. I'm going to give that away. And I'm not saying you have to pick him, but I think I probably would. And I just feel like, I don't know about you guys, I had a little voice crack then as well. I just feel like there's not a whole lot of really, really exciting midfielders to pick for Game Week 29. The only other one I could really think of, he doesn't make the list of the top ones, is Son. You could go for Son, I guess, if you didn't fancy Cole Palmer. I think Son's got Fulham, or Fulham away, which, not too bad of a fixture. But I actually think when you think of how the teams line up, like toe for toe, or toe to toe, I think they're pretty evenly matched this season. And also, Son was benched against Bournemouth in Game Week 28. So, yeah, his minutes aren't fully guaranteed. I think you got to go Palmer. Other players that I've gone for then, I've picked Foden, Bruno Fernandes, and Justin Kluivert. Again, I go back to that Man City point. You might well disagree with me on this, and that's totally cool if you do. But I just think, again, you could go for Foden or Son, I guess. But I just think it's a week where you can chance it with your free hit. You can pick players that aren't necessarily popular, but we all know could do something. And I think Foden is one of those players. You know, Brighton are a really kind of hit and miss team. You know, some days they show up and can beat anyone, and then other days they can show up and get beaten by absolutely anyone. So with this draft, I'm kind of taking my chances that Man City do well against Brighton. And I think if you're on your free hit, you know, it's worth picking players that managers not using their free hit can't have in order to get ahead of them, if that makes sense. And I think Phil Foden, picking him is that reason. Again, similar to Gabriel, Bruno is playing Arsenal as we speak. He's got Leicester away, which is obviously a really cracking fixture. I think he's a decent shout. And I can't imagine many managers, I know a couple of YouTubers might still have him, but I can't imagine many managers in FPL right now have Bruno Fernandes in their team. So in a similar sort of concept to Foden, you pick Bruno because the free hit kind of allows you to do it. And you can't tell me that Bruno Fernandes against Leicester away is a bad idea, right? The guy is probably Man United's sole player that's doing anything at the moment. So yeah, I'll have him. I'd pick him for against that Leicester, or in that Leicester fixture, sorry. And I've gone for Justin Kluivert as well. You know, the guy's probably the outstanding Bournemouth midfielder now. You can see there Semenyo on my bench. Semenyo's actually got higher expected points according to Fantasy Football Hub than Kluivert does. But I think Kluivert's probably in the better form of the two players, and he takes penalties. So for that reason, I think I'd put him just ahead of Semenyo. And with Evan Nilsson back in the team, we saw it against Spurs, just as I predicted, really. Evan Nilsson displaced Dango out of the team, so I don't think you can realistically pick Dango at the moment. And as you can see there, I've actually benched Semenyo, and I'll talk about my front three now, and you can work out who I've benched Semenyo for. Also, I didn't say this on my defence. I went for Jose Sarr in goal. Maybe if you don't like Guardiola, for example, you could pick maybe a Wolves defender. They got Southampton away, which is probably the other team with likely clean sheets, just because it's a good fixture. And actually, you know, all due respect, I guess Man United could do something against Leicester in terms of keeping a clean sheet, but I wouldn't hang my hat on it. So yeah, that's my defensive midfield so far. All right then, on to the forwards. And again, I've got a ranking here of the best forwards for expected points according to Fantasy Football Hub. Top three being Haaland, Wood, Raul Jimenez. Outside of that, you got Beto, Wissa, and Vardy. Now, I think Wissa's a decent option, but I do think that Bournemouth away fixture is really good. Beto, you know, he has had a period of good form, probably dropped out of that already, to be honest. West Ham is a good fixture, but I just don't think he beats those top three, Haaland, Wood, and Raul Jimenez. I guess you could go for Jamie Vardy as like an uber differential against Man United at home, but for me, the front three's got to be Raul Jimenez, Haaland, and Chris Wood. And it does leave you with a little bit of a headache as to who you bench, I guess, because you look at the expected points. Semenyo actually has higher expected points than both Kluivert and Raul Jimenez. Yeah, I'm starting Kluivert and Jimenez above him. In FPL, I really like penalty takers. As you see here, well, unless Cole Palmer gets taken off penalties for missing his one against Leicester, I don't think that happens. I've got Palmer, Bruno, Kluivert, Raul Jimenez, Haaland, and Wood, all penalty takers for their respective teams. So that's 6 penalty takers in my front seven. Yeah, I really like penalty takers, if you couldn't tell. And I don't know, I just think Tottenham are so, well, they can be so poor at times. And I do think Fulham they probably have the edge in that game, to be honest, especially at home. You know, Tottenham drew again against Bournemouth. I think Ange is on the verge of losing his job. They're in a really poor spell at the moment, Tottenham, aren't they? So I think Fulham could definitely get a result against them. And if they do, I think Raul Jimenez could get amongst, he's probably the most likely singular Fulham player to score a goal, if that makes sense. The only downside to him is with Muniz in the sort of wings or waiting on the bench, and we have seen at times Raul Jimenez bench for Muniz, he doesn't play full 90s. So at best, he probably gets 70, 75 minutes in that game. So that's the only real downside to him, is that he isn't a nailed 90-minute man. But when he does play, he's fairly dangerous. It's just a case of, I guess, do you want to go 3-4-3 with Raul Jimenez up front, or a 3-5-2 with Semenyo up front? I don't know. I quite like the idea of spreading my risk away from doubling up on Bournemouth against Brentford, because, yes, I know Brentford have just lost to Villa at home, but I feel like Brentford on their day can show up and beat anyone, and I'm just a little bit worried that could happen against Bournemouth. So yeah, I've gone. That's a long way of saying I prefer Raul Jimenez, I think, to Semenyo, so I went for Raul Jimenez up front. I've gone for Haaland. I think if you're on your free hit, it's a bit of a no-brainer to pick him, really. He is probably the outstanding captain this week. If I wasn't on my free hit and didn't have Haaland, I'd probably say Chris Wood is the second best captain, who I've also, of course, gone for in this free hit team. I do think the two best options this week are probably Haaland and Wood, just in general. And yeah, I think if you're on your free hit, similar sort of concept to Guardiola and Foden, got to go for Haaland, really. I've got a feeling quite a lot of FPL managers are going to go for him that aren't even on their free hit as well. And the beauty of being on your free hit is you can pick Haaland for 29, and then you don't have to hold him for long term if you don't like the idea of that. And you've got to go for Chris Wood, the absolute slaughter that he has been this season. He's in there as well. So that's the 11 of my free hit draft. Just rounding things off, I've got a couple of scores on the doors bits from Fantasy Football Hub. I guess that's what you can call them. By the way, if you want to see this kind of data for yourself for your own free hit drafts, there's a draft sort of maker tool in the Fantasy Football Hub website. It gives you an expected points total. Obviously, you can see there for each of the players. I'm just looking at 1 week, because if you're on your free hit, you only really care about 1 week. But it does show, and you've probably seen my videos where they've got a 3-game week sort of prediction of points. And you get an AI rating. This team gets 63.3 expected points with a 99% AI rating. And obviously, I'm going to give the armband to Erling Haaland. So let me know in the comments what you think of this draft. And if there's any players you take out, and if you did, who would you put in? All right, well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. If you did, please leave me a like rating. Like I said, let me know in the comments, if there's any players you take out. And if you would take any out, who would you replace them with? And yeah, that just leaves me to say, if you've enjoyed the video so far, wanted to see more content from me, you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel. Should be just there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in my next video.